Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. Really excited for my next guest. My friend Anthony Simonie is with us. He's a successful co-founder and built several online and offline businesses in the consulting and training space. He's been in business for more than 17 years. He's got a passion for helping businesses, real estate investors, and professional service providers grow their businesses, as well as raise capital, grow their profits, and effectively leveraging unique marketing strategies for both online and offline businesses. So thank you so much for being here, Anthony. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a nice growing family. We were just chatting about that a bit, but thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's an honor. Thanks for having me. Any chance I get to come on and sort of serve others and put some goodness out into the world, I'm open to it, because I've learned that over the years, many years now doing this. When you said 17 plus, it's like, I think about that and I'm just like, wow, things have changed so much since then. Like, so many things have changed, but there's also so many things that haven't changed. And we could get more into that here in a little bit, but it's like, It's just wild to see how fast that goes. And 17 years seems like it was almost like, maybe a year or two ago. It just goes so fast. So, but yeah, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
You got it. And we run in some of the same circles in kind of the mastermind space, but a lot of it is real estate related. And you did have a hand in trying real estate for a while, but that isn't where you ended up. But you're kind of tangentially in the real estate world, providing services and marketing advice for real estate companies. But you started way back in the corporate world, in marketing and sales for a medical device company, right?
Yeah. So, Johnson & Johnson, I was selling medical devices. So I'd actually go into the OR with the surgeons, and I would be there as kind of like a consultant if they needed, if they had a question about the product as it related to the anatomy of the body and, different things like that. And people hear me say that and they're like, why would you be in an OR with a highly skilled surgeon and they're asking you questions? And the answer to that is, I don't know. I don't know why they did that, but no, in all honesty, they put us through some crazy training, and just wild how much they pack into you and train you to be in that environment, and to be able to sort of maintain your nerves as somebody asks you a question at that level that ultimately leads to a specific outcome for a patient. And so it's very interesting, to say the least. But yeah, that was my corporate days. And it's wild to think back to that, because again, it seems like it was only yesterday, but it was a little while back.
Yeah. Well, that really sounds like kind of a high stress job in general, but even more so when you're thinking about like your sales could lead to somebody living or dying ultimately, right? If you're in the OR with somebody who, a doctor who took your advice and decided to buy your thing, and you're in there. I mean, what was that even like, to think that like you could be there and witness somebody, either surviving or not?
Well, it's pretty wild. I'd say that a large majority of the cases that I would be in would be like hernia cases and stuff like that. But on occasion, I'd be in an open heart case, and they'd be asking about a certain suture or, different things that go along with that. Most of them they know all their stuff that they need to know, but occasionally there's something, right? And but the wild thing about it is, growing up, I'd see blood and I'd get queasy. And my mom was like, when I got this job, she's like, how did that even happen? Because you're literally there watching him cut open people, move intestines around and body parts, and it's pretty intense. And I think for me, it just was focusing on the person. And I use that same sort of psychology now, is when I'm doing anything in business, if it's a challenge or if I'm speaking from a stage, because I'm not a trained speaker, but I do speak from stage. And people are always like, wow, because I actually suffered from social anxiety disorder for a long time. And like, how do you even do that? And what it came down to was just, I had a mentor one time tell me, he's like, this isn't about you, it's about them. And so as long as you're bringing value and you're focusing on them and you're wanting to give them a good experience, you don't have to have those same sort of nerves, or they won't affect you in the same way. The spotlight is really on them. And so I
Mm-hmm.
use that, that same sort of thought process from back then, even now. It's like, don't put the focus on you and how you're feeling, put the focus on your audience or your client or whoever it is. And when you do that, it's crazy how things happen. Not only does it usually delivers a solid outcome for them, but also it usually comes back to you in some way, shape, or form at some point in time. And so it's a wild dynamic, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting because like I had an ex-girlfriend who was in pharmaceutical sales, right? And I've always been kind of like looking at that industry with like medical device sales and pharmaceutical sales as, even though it's sales, it's still like it's like top, right? It's like this glamorous job where you can make a lot of money and you're running around in these interesting circles with doctors and you know, you're taking them around and trying to earn their trust, and you're going to sell them some expensive stuff, and it can lead to some, pretty nice things for yourself if you do it properly, right? But despite that outward success, with some good numbers and salary and all that success, it did have some negative consequences on you. You mentioned the social anxiety and there was probably some pretty severe stress, and you even mentioned some health issues. What was that about?
Yeah, I mean, it really, what people don't realize, unless they've experienced it, is that social anxiety is no joke. I mean, it is debilitating. So much so that it keeps you from almost. I remember times when I didn't want to even go out of the house, but I had to. Like, it was my job, and I had to be in front of people. I had to talk to people, and it was very, very difficult. So I had really no choice but to figure it out. And
Hmm.
but when you're dealing with that kind of thing, it leads to other things. I mean, high blood pressure, and if you don't get it under control, it could lead to other health consequences. And I think I'm not alone in saying this. Like, so people listening to this, some of them are probably going, "Yeah, I understand what that feels like," because a lot of people have it, and sometimes people only have it in certain situations. But when it happens and they experience it, it's unforgettable. Because if you've ever had a panic attack, it feels like you're dying. It feels
Hmm.
like you're having a heart attack, and a lot of people think they're having a heart attack when they go to the ER and they're having a panic attack. A lot of the symptoms are like that. And so if you can imagine somebody having that uncontrolled in their life, it's it's pretty annoying and it's debilitating because it's hard to function like a normal human being. And so I think what you're saying there is like the corporate world, the one of the biggest reasons I exited the corporate world, because I always wanted to be like, I wanted to be in pharmaceutical sales, and actually I was in pharmaceutical sales prior to medical device. And then I thought, hey, I'm not making enough money in pharmaceutical, right? I can make more in medical. And so I thought, hey, I'll just get a better job, I'll be happier, whatever. And I go do that, and it's the same thing. And so what happened for me, the epiphany I had was, I wanted to help people and see the outcome. I didn't really get to see that in pharmaceutical sales. So that was one kind of check, like, the doctor prescribed whatever and didn't get to see what happened. Medical device, you kind of got to see what happened, like you're a part of it. But then you had all the other stuff that went along with it, which was, okay, Anthony, thank you so good for crushing it this year. Do you want to make the same amount of money you made last year? I'm like, absolutely, I do. I want to make more. And they're like, okay, great. Well, here's your new numbers you got to hit. Thank you for all that. You don't get any more from that. Here's your new numbers. You got to work twice as hard to make the same amount of money. And as I got into it, I'm thinking, and meanwhile, I see all these other reps, they're jumping from company to company. And what I learned is that they're maxing out the pay plan, and then there's nowhere to go except for taking a management position, which nobody wanted, or very few wanted, because they're like, okay, now I got to be responsible for everybody else's numbers too. And
Hmm.
so they jump from company to company to get a new pay plan, and so they can make money. For me, one day it just hit me. I'm like, man, I'm getting sick and tired of this. And I had a buddy that came to me and said, hey, if you ever get tired of what you're doing, we're we're doing this thing where we're cleaning out foreclosed properties and we're making about $1,000 a day doing it. And I was like, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun,
Hmm.
but $1,000 a day sounds pretty good. And so one day I got fed up and I called him. I was like, hey, let's have lunch. And we were talking over lunch and he's telling me about this business. And I just decided, hey, you know what? Yeah, show me what you're doing. And I just want to get involved. And so what I did, Benson, is I started, that was the start of it was like my side hustle while I was working a full-time job with Johnson& Johnson selling medical
Mm.
devices. And so I get involved in this business and it starts to grow and I'm trying to juggle both of them. Meanwhile, my manager is like all over me for this report, that report, what are you doing? Ride-alongs. And one day I remember I was standing on the deck of my mom's place and this guy calls me and he starts just ranting at me like, I need this, I need that. And I was already kind of trending to where I was going to replace my income. And I said, hey, his name was Ryan, and God bless you if you're out there watching this right now. I I was like, I don't think I'm going to do that. He's like, well, why? I said, I'm done. And I just quit. I was
Wow.
done because I had waited so long and I put myself through so much. I thought, because I'm persistent, and I thought I'll just stick it out and it'll get better. But it didn't. And thank God I had this opportunity to start this other business, because that business ended up being what led to everything I'm doing today. Started with that business because I took that business in property preservation and I started in Missouri, and then I expanded to Los Angeles. I put my brother in charge in Missouri, put my other brother in charge in Los Angeles, and then I moved to Arizona and expanded in Phoenix area. And it was during the time when foreclosures were everywhere. And so we were crushing it. And then that same friend came to me and said, you know what we should do? We should turn this into a training business.
Mm.
You've done so well. We'll just like, and he takes me to this Dan Kennedy event. And I was like, who's Dan Kennedy? And everybody knows him now as like the godfather of direct response, marketing. And I go to this event. I remember, never forget, it was in St. Louis, and I started hearing all these people talk about, I'm making this much money teaching people how to do this, and just kind of teach them how to do how I do my business. And I was like, I could do that. So long story short, we take this business, or we take this, take everything that I've learned and even developed. Like, he helped me get started in the business, but I other stuff, how to run it like a business, how to grow it, how to become more profitable. I had all the stuff, figured out. And so we launched this thing, and it goes really well because everybody's losing their businesses, their homes, and people are just looking to replace their income. And I've got this business opportunity that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to get into, and I can show you how to generate, at least 10K a month in a relatively short period of time. And so I had like 10,000 people come through that program. 10,000.
Wow.
And so it was very successful. I made the mistake of giving that friend majority ownership because it was his idea technically. And long story short, he ended up screwing me out of the business because my son, who is right here in this picture, when he was brand new baby, about 18 months old, he had a seizure and almost died. And yeah, it was the craziest thing. I was in my office and my wife started screaming. I was like, what is going on? I went out there and he was blue, not breathing. And so I grabbed him just out of, my reflexes were just like grab him, and I started giving him CPR. And that went on for a long time. I couldn't get him to breathe. And I heard this voice. And you can let me know if I'm sharing too much, by the way.
No, no, please.
I hear this voice, and I will proclaim it from now to the end until I'm gone. Like I think it was God talking to me saying, he said, Anthony, turn him on his side one more time. And I turned him on his side and he took a breath. No kidding. Took a breath because I was like, I didn't even know what to expect because I literally thought he's gone. I mean, it was that long. I was like, he's gone. I was already planning it out in my head. What do I do? What's life going to be like? And he took a breath, and right then EMS showed up. They put him on the stretcher, hooked him up to oxygen, checked, all that stuff. And then we followed him in the ambulance to the hospital. While we're in the hospital, I asked my friend who lived nearby at the time, to let my dog out because we were going to be at the hospital a couple of days. And he did. But what I found out later is he went to my office and saw on my whiteboard I had a new business sketched out, and he didn't like that. So he came up with a crazy story about how the Secretary of State wanted us to amend our agreement. And I was like, whatever, I wasn't worried about it. I was like, I'm worried about my son. Is he okay? Is we going to get out of this hospital with him alive? And I trust him. So I just signed this thing. And effectively what it did is it gave away half of my part of the business back over to him. So you can imagine just how crushing that was. Son almost passed away in the hospital. Best friend comes up with this, this change of agreement, and it just crushed us. And so I literally, for I think it was probably 2 or 3 months, I cried myself to sleep. I'd wake up, didn't want to get out of bed. I just like lay there in fetal position until one day I heard another voice. I was like, Anthony, dude, do you realize what you've just accomplished? Like all these skills I learned how to write copy, how to do webinars, how to create webinars, how to run advertising, buy media, how to manage an email list properly, all that stuff I had to learn. I'm like, this is nuts. I have all the skills that everybody it looks to get to be able to grow a successful business. Plus I've already helped a lot of people do that. And so I was part of, this might ring a bell, but I was part of Digital Marketers War Room. It's a very high level mastermind back in the day. And it was like
who ran that?
That was Perry Belcher and Ryan Dice.
Okay.
Roland Frazier. Yeah. So they, digital marketer, they're probably one of the most well-known in the digital marketing space. Right. So they had this who's who war room and we were in it, and I met some good friends through there. And I had a friend, hear about what happened. He's like, hey, Anthony, we're doing some really cool stuff over on LinkedIn. You should check it out. And at first I was like, isn't that a place to go get a job and post your resume? He's like, no, we're actually using it to generate, clientele. So I hopped on and started playing around with it. And I started kind of applying some of the different things that I know how to do over there and just figuring some other stuff out. And within the first 30 days, I came up with a new offer, had no testimonials. It was just brand new. I was new in the niche. Nobody knew who I was, but it's a good offer. And the first 30 days I sold like $60,000 and collected money, cash. And the offer had another $60,000 in recurring coming in from that, plus equity in the people's businesses that I was helping. And so I thought, man, that was really cool. Then I thought, well, maybe I just got lucky, because sometimes that happens in business. Things align and it happens. So I went out the next 30 days, I did the exact same thing. And so then I knew I had something that was duplicatable. And then everybody started asking me like, what are you doing? And that's how the whole LinkedIn thing, the LinkedIn part of my business came about, was just coming from this horrible, bad business breakup that I had that just led me into this other kind of pathway. And that's kind of the thing, everybody talks about is, what's the silver lining in the challenge you're going through? Because there always is one. It's just a matter if we can set our minds to be able to recognize it and use it for our gain rather than letting it take us backwards and keep us there. It's kind of like Rocky, right? It is like life's going to hit you hard, and that whole speech harder than anything else. And it's not about how hard you can hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how it felt. And actually, I thank God that that Rocky franchise actually exists, because that was one of my favorite movies growing up. So I had that kind of in me to like just keep going. And I'm glad I did, because not only did it bring me out the other side and more successful, but I've been able to help so many people along the way. And that in and of itself is the thing that really addicted me to this kind of business that we do today. Is the money's great, but what's even greater is the impact. And when somebody tells you that you help save their home or their marriage, that sticks with you, and it's hard to shake that. So that's kind of what it is for me. And kind of my long tangent of answering your question that you asked me probably about 15 minutes ago.
No, thank you for telling that story, and thank God that your son is doing okay. You're talking about how he's doing racing now, and he's
Yeah.
involved in sports. Um, Part of your story resonated with me because I had a business partner who screwed me over before too, and I held that really deeply for a long time. Like I really resentful, and I built walls up, for future business partners, and it kind of ate me up inside for a long time, and even to this day, it's still like
Mhm.
that's why I'm talking about it with you, because you really touched a nerve with me. How did you not let that like consume you? Like I want to just go strangle this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is he still alive?
Yeah. It's really hard, Vincent. It's like I think for the people out there that are going through something hard, at least for me, what works for me is I have a deep faith in God. And I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but I can tell you from my experience and everything that I've seen and along the way is without that faith and being able to open a book and find an answer to a challenge or a problem, that has been life changing for me because we as humans, we tend to hold on to that stuff, right? We are it's almost like we thrive on negativity naturally. And we will always gravitate to that. And look, you open up your social media at any point given during the day and it's there, right? So it's not like it's hard to not have that in your it's hard it actually is hard to not have that in your life, and it's easy to kind of follow in that path. So for me, it was just reminding myself that it's going to be okay. There's something greater, and this is not what life's about. There's something, this happened for some reason, and I'm going to figure it out. Or if I don't figure it out, I'm going to just take it as a lesson learned and keep going because you're right. There was a time when, I mean, like, just be nauseous out of nowhere, just becoming nauseous and just sick to your stomach every time you think about it. And then you get angry, right? You're like you said, you just want to strangle that person. You're like, why'd you do that? And in my case, it was like, it was the betrayal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, the stuff that really sucked. But then it was like, we were friends, man. Like we hung out as a family. We came up with some of the best business ideas together, or while we were at the gym, or those kinds of things. That's what really stung the most because ultimately I think deep down I knew I could replace the money, and that's all, you could always make more money, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the time I'd lost, um, the friendship I thought I had, it just felt really just yucky.
Well,
If
and the
you,
timing of it too, right? Right when your child was going through this life-threatening situation, and he saw an opportunity
yeah,
to take
he could,
advantage of you. It's just, I can't even believe it.
it's tough, and it is. I mean, even to this day, like I feel it, I still feel it, but I can I can handle it. You know what I mean? I can process it through a different lens, look at it through a different lens, if you will, than I did then because it was like it was hard. And then there was the um do I go after him, legally? And I got to thinking that I mean I could, but then you have all that negativity that comes with that. And oftentimes you don't get anything out of it. And the only body that gets paid is the attorneys. So it's
Yep.
like, you want to go through that and like have it's going to naturally affect your family life because it's that extra negativity it's no good. So I think sometimes you just got to learn to let go. For me, it's like the faith that I have. I could open a book, I could read in this book. I'm talking about the Bible, obviously, and I could always find something that's in there that helps me to think about what I'm going through in a different light, a proper light. And I think people also they look at us like they see your success and they're like they think it just magically happened. Like you don't go through hard times. Like even now, I mean, it's never like always puppy dogs and rainbows. There's always challenges, and
Yeah.
there's days I feel like, oh man. But again, I think it's the mindset and the perspective that you have around it, and that's what's helped me anyway along the way.
Yeah. So at that time period, well, even before then, right? Like you had transitioned from somebody who was doing the work, and you were an entrepreneur as well. But then you transitioned from learning and doing to teaching others, like what was the biggest lesson you learned about that? And what's the biggest difference for you between, the doing and the teaching, especially like as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I think with folks, just us again being human beings, is a lot of us don't take action, right? A lot of us want to learn how to do the thing, but then we don't actually take the action that will lead to the next objective and achieving what you ultimately want to achieve. And I think, especially in this age we live in now, there's information everywhere. So I think people are just information junkies. I think we all are. And I think we've been trained to be that way. So for me, that's a little bit frustrating because, especially if you know something and you do something actually in your own businesses that works, and then somebody else doesn't do it, it's a little frustrating because you can see what can happen in their businesses and their lives if they would just do the thing, right? If they do the thing, then get the power. But you got to almost like push them really hard to do the thing. And here in the virtual world, like I couldn't make you do something, right? It's like unless I live next door to you, then I come knock on your door every morning and be like, "Hey, you doing this thing, right? You
Yeah.
ready to go to the gym or whatever it is."
People would pay a lot of money for that, by the way.
Now we might be getting there, right, with this AI
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know, but the robot shows up at the door and is like, "Hey, you have not completed module 2 of your training."
Well, think
Do
about
this.
trainers, like personal trainers, like they're literally like physically meeting you someplace and making you do the thing. Like that's why it's such big business.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I think there's going to be a lot of things are just changing so rapidly, with all the technology. But I do want every time I talk and speak with somebody, I try to get them to stop focusing so much on that because it could be overwhelming and you can get lost in it. And then you forget what actually are the fundamentals of a good business. And the fundamentals of
Yeah.
a good business is building that relationship. And there's a human element involved there that you cannot replace. And if they ever figure that out, I mean, God help us all because none of us will be needed. But we as human beings, we thrive on that, that connection, human to human. And so I think too many people are getting wrapped up too much in the technology. And I'm not saying don't know about it, don't apply it where it makes sense, but for Pete's sake, don't try to have it build your relationships for you because it's not, I don't see it happening. And again, if it
Yeah.
does,
I mean, it can help out. Right now, it's just kind of it's a bonus to have it in the funnel. It can help with efficiency and some
sure.
automation and some of the things that really just kind of suck you in. Like you mentioned, you learned copywriting. That's where I use it a lot, is in like first drafts of copy, and then kind of getting uh, putting my own flair into it. But the copy itself comes out of my own outlines. So like
Yeah.
I kind of just brain dump all the things I want to say, and then it's like, okay, I need some help organizing it and making it conversational. But yeah, AI is definitely making a big impact on a lot of the stuff, especially with like this whole Stargate initiative that's coming out of the administration, and deep, what it was, the new one out of China,
Yeah. Yeah.
um deep
That just came out.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just came out just a couple days ago, which is making some waves with even like stock prices. So it's like constantly changing, and I haven't gotten too deep into it, but I know it's going to play a big part in a lot of people's businesses. But I like that advice of, don't get too caught up in it, because there's still like all the day-to-day stuff that has to happen. And it could be certainly a shiny object with AI. But, thinking about advice, like what would you say is the most counterintuitive piece of advice that you've gotten from somebody else that just didn't work?
Counterintuitive that just didn't work. I think there's one is you hear, and had this happen in my own business, is it's like email, for example. Email marketing has changed radically over the past 12 months. In fact, it's one of the things that we do in our business is help people to manage their emails, but also like keep them out of spam or fix their spam problem because it's a huge problem right now. And I don't think it's going to get any easier because the powers that be, they do not want people running around, with the typical email marketing tactics of making claims and just like, it's almost spamming in a sense. They're kind of done with that. And so it's no longer a set it and forget it. I was taught that you can just set up your funnels, right? You put your 30-day sequence in there and you're good, but you're not good. Not
Mm.
now. Right now, it's like a lot of people, and going back to your point, it's like, and so that's kind of the unconventional that didn't work. Like it worked for a short period of time, then it didn't anymore. And my point there is that things change. And what's happening is because email is so important, everybody knows email is more important. They've learned over the past couple of years, especially just how important it is that you should have been taking care of your list because everybody's revenue has been down, right? And there's multiple reasons for that, but because of that, they kind of lost track of their email. They were used to making money, just all that money coming in the front door, and then their email list got kind of sacrificed because they just took it for granted. But things change now. Now you're hearing a lot of people, they're like, my open rates are so low, I don't know what I'm doing. At the end of the day, they're just losing money because they're not following the proper practices. But here's where I'm going with that. So you got to be careful of whose advice that you take when they say that this is the only thing you need to do and you're going to be good forever, because it's never good forever anymore. I don't care what you're doing. You have to like have a finger on the pulse. AI, how many applications come out every week? Thousands of new applications, real world applications. So it's easy to get caught up in all that. But again, going back and focusing on the things that are foundational principles of success, build a relationship, deliver value, make sure that you don't treat people like a number, you treat them like a person. And that means don't go to Chat GPT and have all your emails written by Chat GPT and then pop that into your autoresponders or your broadcast. You mentioned something I think is very important to touch on. I assume you know a little bit about copywriting, like what good copy looks like, right? So that's different from somebody that's like, hey, I'm going to go use Chat GPT and I'm going to have it write all my emails and do all this and try to get good copy. They don't even know what good copy looks like. So when they put something in, it comes out, they don't know if it's going to work or not. They don't know if the powers that be are going to detect that as an AI written email. And then now you get flagged. I mean, there's all these different things, right? So while I love technology, leverage the heck out of it where you can, where it makes sense. Make sure that you know a little something about the thing that you're trying to do with the technology so that you can get the desired outcome and not end up on the wrong side of, the results you're looking for, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just business fundamentals. Some of the stuff just hasn't changed. You mentioned Dan Kennedy, which now is, intimately involved with like Russell Brunson. And there's a guy, what the heck is his name? Steve Larson. You know who Steve Larson is?
I've heard of Steve Larson.
Yeah, so he used to work for Russell. He was one of his funnel builders at one of the stages of the company. And he had this podcast. I don't remember what it was called, but it was all about like if there wasn't the internet today and there wasn't all the technology tools and there wasn't all the things that people do now to sell products, people sold products like completely offline.
Yeah,
And the same principles still apply, right? There's like this still like where you said, build trust, deliver value, you have to answer their questions and get them figure out a way to solve their problems. And he talked about the way back when like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, like when they were going to promote a circus, like those same philosophies still apply today. Is there
yeah,
anything that you can think of that is in that realm of like, okay, that's like the old school, but it doesn't matter. It's like foundational to marketing and sales success.
absolutely. One of the things that comes to mind just immediately is, conversation. What
Hmm.
we're trying to do with all of our marketing, all of our advertising, all of our business stuff that leads to a sale is we're trying to get a conversation going. We got somebody to raise their hand. And so I think, speaking of conversation in that light, back then you had to talk to people, right? You had to talk to them. It wasn't just all, digital. And so even more so then the relationship in talking to folks in that way was really, really important, right? Because they couldn't just, we hit somebody and somebody fires up their Facebook profile, they couldn't just hit somebody with an ad. It was way different. And so I think a lot of people then had more grit, right? Or they exercised their grit, right? They didn't keep it in the storeroom, right? They actually went out there and did it. But I think those things, those fundamentals are so, again, as I said earlier, I think we get lost in technology, and those fundamentals are part of the loss that happens with that. Whereas we got to be willing to talk to people. And it's like when I'm working with folks, if they say they don't want to talk to somebody, then I can't help them, because if I'm helping somebody leverage LinkedIn to raise capital for their real estate deals, or they're using some of my strategy, part of that is being willing to talk to the person. Because I could promise you that the kind of people that you're going to run into on LinkedIn that are higher net worth, they're not just going to hand over their money without a relationship. And in order to build a relationship, you got to be willing to have a conversation, right? And so that conversation can start online, but then you got to get it offline, which is where you're talking about, like the Ringling Brothers, like Barnum and Bailey, like that was all offline. Take
Right.
them offline, have a phone call with them, or have a, I say offline because I kind of bundle Zoom as being offline, because Zoom is like the new way to make phone calls, right? So
Right.
here we are. It almost feels weird. I don't know about you, but sometimes when somebody wants to have a phone conversation with me, I'm like, I almost feel like something's weird, like it's off, because I can't see them and we can't
Yeah.
interact that way.
I'm the same way. I much prefer Zoom than just jumping on the phone, or people will still send me long texts. I'm like, I don't want to sit here texting all day. Like,
Yeah,
and there's like this time period where people move from having conversations to trying to expedite everything with texts and emojis and, abbreviations, LOL and all those things. And now it's like coming
yeah,
back to a place where people are more appreciative of, like, being able to sit with somebody on Zoom and look at their facial expressions, look at their body, their mannerisms, and use that as a way of having a good conversation. Because a lot of it doesn't come through. Well, I know most of it doesn't come through in text, and it certainly doesn't all come through voice.
absolutely. Absolutely. And if you can teach yourself to have more of a real authentic conversation, that's going to help you too, right? Because if we're sitting here and and I'm like just real stiff, or I'm just like not looking at you at all. It's like, yeah, it sounds good. All those kinds of things those are signals for you, right? You
Yeah.
can adjust your conversation. Be good at, like, not only be on the other side of that to be able to sort of help change that behavior, but like if you can practice the way I talk with my hands a lot. So people are like, hey, you talk with your hands a lot. I do. I
Is
have Italian.
Simone Italian?
It's Italian, so it's blame
There
it
you
on that,
go.
right? So,
Yeah.
but it helps you also to get better at your conversation skills, if that makes sense, because you can see yourself on the screen, right?
Yeah.
And those are important things, because communication isn't just verbal, right? It's like body language, it's tonality, all those types of things. Like sometimes I'll lean in a presentation, and I'll just talk lighter, right? Because when you lean in to do that, they kind of lean in with you, right? So the little things like that, as you're learning how to communicate, that can help you be so much more effective at building relationships with folks,
Did you
and
teach
taking
Joe
those extra.
Biden that? Is that where he learned that from?
You know what? His people reached out to me, and I was unavailable.
Yeah. I know he tried to use that in a couple of his speeches, and he does that with people. He gets real close and whispers to them. Um, yeah. No, it is. It's
I
so
no offense to
powerful.
anybody. I to each their own on the political thing, but I just want,
Oh yeah, it's just
yeah,
relevant. But no, I noticed that before, right? Because politicians are taking advice from people who are giving them, you know,
oh yeah,
methodologies and strategies about how to communicate their message better so that it can sell what it is they're trying to sell at that point in time.
yeah. Well, do you
It's
know
used at all
that
different levels.
the first when Trump won the first election, I forgot the copywriter that ran all his speeches through the Hemingway app. And I don't know if
Mm,
you've heard of the Hemingway app, but the Hemingway app
no.
is it it's worth 20 bucks. You can plug your copy into it, and it'll tell you where it's hard to read, or it could be broken down to a lower grade level. So he ran all his speeches through this app, and it came back at a fifth grade level. So that's an important thing for you to understand as a communicator, because if you're going to communicate email or on your post in social media, or just giving a talk, if you can keep it at a fifth grade level, your message resonates with people and very easily. you don't want it to be complicated or hard or have somebody think too hard about what you're trying to get across to them. And so you're absolutely right. It's learning those things, and they knew it and they were smart, and they just, I don't want to say dumbed it down, but they just reduced the amount of thought that had to go into understanding the message.
Oh yeah. It's so challenging. We've got a new offering here at Privy, and I'm leading the kind of the sales efforts on this enterprise level product, and it's so hard to distill down like this huge value proposition that involves technology into something that people can understand, because early on when you're talking to people, like maybe it's not even like decision makers, but then you get to the decision makers and they oftentimes don't even understand technology or the things, because they got people for that. So you
Yeah.
have to communicate to these people who are decision makers that this is going to translate into dollars. And it's so challenging.
Yep. Yep. It is. You've got to really, one of the hardest things to do is put yourself in the other person's shoes and be able to see it from their side of the table. But the more you get good at that, the better your messaging comes across, the more that you will sell or convert, whatever your terminology is, depending on
Mm-hmm.
offering. Um, because you're helping them to understand you understand them
Right.
without them going, oh, this is, you're trying to sell me something, right? And hopefully what the person is selling is helpful to the person, right? This could be used for evil as it can be used for good, but I'm assuming that those that are using it for good, or at least
Yeah.
the people in our circle.
Right. So you were just mentioning about, being able to communicate effectively when you're selling. And one of the most important parts of the sales process is asking questions, right? So you can really nail the messaging so you can deliver proper value and show them that your solution solves their problems, right? Because you know their problems. You asked. How can you do that in marketing when you're doing like this one to many sort of thing through either email copy or a landing page, a VSL, like something that is meant for the masses? How can you ask those questions so that you're giving them the right message?
Yeah, so I think where a lot of people they get it wrong is they make assumptions that aren't true. So if you're not listening to what the market is actually telling you, like what's the feedback? How are they responding? And this comes from testing, right? Like send your stuff out, but how are people reacting with it? Are they buying it? Are they booking calls? Are they commenting on it? What is that feedback? And then use it to shape your offer, use it to shape your messaging. Because I think too often we as marketers or just human beings in general, we make these assumptions on what we think is going on in the market, what we think that person is wanting. Oftentimes we're wrong. Oftentimes I'm wrong when I make the assumption. So I want to know, I'll put something out there as like my best educated guess, and then I'll wait and see what happens. And then again, this goes back to, you can't just set things and forget them, right? Because even though if you figure it out at that moment in time, things change over time. So then you got to always kind of be looking at it. But yeah, I think to answer your question, it's a matter of figuring out what the feedback is from the market and then make adjustments in your copy in order to do that, right? Because you're
Mhm.
addressing, you're talking about what they're experiencing. So if you know what a day in their life is like very descriptively, and you know what their problem is and how your solution solves that problem, you can talk to them in that way versus, hey, I got this great thing, you should just buy it because it'll make your life better. Well, how do you know? Versus, hey, you wake up in the morning and you have trouble getting out of bed, or what are your energy levels low when you get up in the morning? Like you're getting more descriptive about how they feel, right? And you're getting into their kind of psyche, if you will,
Yeah.
and what's happening in real world terms versus making that assumption.
Do you know who Nate Woodbury is?
I do.
Yeah. So Nate has a good strategy. He calls it the leaf strategy, and he goes to the extreme on having a really niche message. So instead of just having, a thing that's an ad that says, "Hey, do you want to make more money?" and then that's it, right? People are like, "Well, yeah," but his ads are, the leaf strategy is, okay, you start with the trunk, like the core problem. And then you go into the branches, then you go into the twigs, and eventually you get to a leaf. And the leaf could be something so nichey that like it's, do you want to make more money as a dentist in Aurora, Colorado, who's trying to help people who are looking for an alternative to braces, like really, really nichey. And he's found that that really converts better because you're talking to like a specific audience with a specific message, and there's not a whole lot of room for misunderstanding that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions, this is something for people to write down. One of the questions you can ask in your conversations, or even if you just want to ask somebody through chat, is, what has you considering making a change? Right? Because you're
Mm,
not saying you're not assuming that they're gonna make a change, but if they responded to something that you sent out and you say, "What has you consider making a change?" Watch and see what happens. Like people will tell you a lot.
yeah,
You,
I like that. It's kind of an open-ended question too, right? Like,
yep,
and some people will just start to pour out. They'll just start to pour out all their problems, everything that's facing them, and then you can cater your message and your sales process to what it is or the why. Why are they considering making a change?
yep, and
I like
yeah,
that
exactly.
question.
Then you could get into it, and then you start figuring out those branches that you're talking about, right? So because those are
Mhm.
the symptoms, right? So now you find the symptoms, and those symptoms can be an email in and of themselves, right? It could be dedicated to that one little symptom.
Mhm.
And so now you're getting, and the only people opening that email are going to be people that are interested in solving that particular problem or what have that symptom or whatever it is. So you're right. The more that you can dig down into that, the better off you are. But you know what happens with people? They get lazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they get lazy or they just don't have time. And again, we're taught, we've been spoiled for so long with like email, for example. We have been spoiled for, going on a couple decades now until this massive changes, right? Where you could just shoot emails out and it was all good. But now you got to put a little more work into it. And we're not complaining because we enjoy helping people to dial that in. But nonetheless, it's something that it's got to be on the radar all the time now, for sure.
Well, there's so many different channels to consider too, right? That whole concept of being omnipresent and having the same message from different angles, social media, email, print, like all the other places. Um, so it's pretty exciting.
It all should
Well,
lead to your database. You know,
yeah,
you should get it. Because that's where it happens. So if you're doing LinkedIn marketing, Facebook marketing, advertising, those people need to go to your database because that's where you own that resource.
yep, yep. You can start to build that lead list, and if you can segment them in any way, try to, right? Whether it's a geolocation or based off of experience level or what their niche is, like some sort tagging them in the system so that when you are doing the email marketing or retargeting them through a pixel or something like that, like you're sending them a message that's a little more refined, right? And then you can put them into smaller buckets over time based off of their interaction with the messaging.
100%. And that right there, that would change your business. If somebody's listening to that right now, what Benton just said, if you could figure that part out, that would change your business
Yeah.
and quickly.
Man, we're just getting into the strategy here and we're getting toward the end of the hour. Would you come back another time and talk a little bit more granular about strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We can
I do want to talk to you more too about like the fundraising piece of it too, because this is something that, my audience is interested in. I'm interested in is, the fundraising aspect of like how to the marketing and sales enablement process works for these, high net worth individuals and fundraising and helping them solve their, diversification problems, or why are they considering doing something else in investing
Yep.
into some sort of a syndication or something like that. So I would love to talk to you more about that another time. But Anthony, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you sharing some of your time with us. For anybody who's interested in working with you, how can they get a hold of you? And by the way, who should reach out to you?
Yeah, there's a so we do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So if you're looking to raise capital, LinkedIn, and that might be one of the things I come back and talk about later is how we're leveraging LinkedIn to do that. But we do really well with with raising capital for operators, syndicators. If you need private lenders or you need private money, there is a blue ocean of opportunity over on LinkedIn, and we've been capitalizing on it for like 8 or 9 years now, right? So, there's a lot of people just kind of waking up to it, but it's still relatively early. But you're starting to see people with all that, they're getting fed up with all the kind of other crazy stuff that's happened on other social media platforms, and now they're starting to wake up to the opportunity. So it is a good time to hop in there. But if you're looking to raise capital, you're looking for more affluent clientele, and you want to do it in a different way, where it's not the same old social media strategies. We could chat about how that works on LinkedIn, and then we do a lot of email stuff to do with email marketing. So we do like list reviews and stuff like that to make sure people aren't stuck in spam somewhere on a blacklist, and we know how to fix that problem, and if they are, and we know how to optimize email really well. So if you want to squeeze more money out of your email list, we might want to have a chat there. But yeah, they can email me at anthony@anthonysimonie.com, and maybe you can put that below the video or wherever you're going to post this on the page, and just reach out, and I'm happy to have a conversation. And then when I come back next time, we could dig deeper into different strategies, and happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man, for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Appreciate everybody listening today. Keep an eye out for more amazing guests just like Anthony on future episodes of the REI Hacker Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
That's a wrap on today's Real Estate Revelations. Thank you for tuning into the REI Hacker Podcast. Remember, every property has a story, and every deal is a lesson. Until next time, keep hacking the real estate world.